This is the next in the Patriot Minute series. I'm Grandpa Rick. I'm going to talk about the American spy Virginia Hall, the Nazis' worst nightmare. During World War II, the Nazis considered Virginia Hall, in fact, the most dangerous Allied spy, at least for a time. While undercover in France, she made fools of the Gestapo, these German secret police. Still, all her life, she rarely talked about her extraordinary career. Reluctantly, one day, she'd said to someone, quote, "Many of my friends were killed for talking too much." Unquote. In truth, it would be hard to name a more effective, highly honored, yet little-known American woman spy than Virginia Hall. She was born April 6, 1906, in Baltimore, Maryland. Her story, like her indomitable spirit, could never unfold in the conventional manner. As a child, she disappeared into the nearby woods in the Maryland countryside. She developed a passion for freedom and for American individualism. Right away, her parents could see her qualities of self-sufficiency, intelligence, and doggedness, qualities shaping her destiny, even saving her life in the years ahead, as we'll see. In the 1920s, the doors to the U.S. Foreign Service, a career path that Virginia really wanted badly, were closed to women, simply because someone was a woman. Only men were being hired. Undeterred, she took matters into her own hands, however. She traveled to Paris, studying French, and later she got an entry-level clerical job at the U.S. Embassy in Warsaw, Poland. Next, we find her in Turkey, where she made the mistake of going with a group of embassy officers hunting. While scaling a fence, her shotgun caught on the wire and went off, shooting away part of her foot. Lack of effective medical care gave her gangrene in her foot and then her leg, requiring that her lower leg below the knee was amputated. When healed and walking on a wooden leg, she was then told that she now had zero chance of getting her dream job as a U.S. diplomat. Most people would have at that point, I think, called it quits and gone home, considering themselves a failure and now probably permanently crippled. But not Virginia. She stayed in Europe during the 1930s. She mastered French, Italian, and German. She seemed to understand that such language skills would soon become valuable, and she had a knack for them. The clouds of war gathered all over Europe. Virginia could see what was coming and wanted to do something about it. Skilled at operating in a foreign environment, she found herself square in the path of a deadly storm, exactly where she wanted to be. It was 1939 now, and the Nazi war machine was on the march. When the Germans invaded France in the spring of 1940, she got a job with the French military, driving ambulances from the front to the hospitals in the rear, dodging fire from dive-bombing German Stuka warplanes. When France fell to the Nazis, she escaped to England. Recruited then by the British Special Operations Executive, the SOE, and in fact the SOE would later be rolled into the British MI6, their Foreign Intelligence Service. Timing is so often everything. For Virginia, it was exactly in this case. For Britain had spent months trying to get male spies into occupied Europe, but had been ineptly unsuccessful. In fact, they'd lost many of these agents, or most of them. And they determined to try a different tact, and they decided to send in young females, young women that they trained. In fact, by the end of the war, Britain had trained and shipped 41 female agents clandestinely into Nazi-occupied Europe. But this was costly, highly costly. Only about half of them survived their operational assignments behind German lines. The Gestapo got up to speed quickly, started focusing on women spies, and was absolutely ruthless hunting down these women agents. Following training, Virginia was shipped clandestinely to the south of France, working in the city of Lyon, operating under the alias Marie Monin. She worked the shadows, building a network of informants and organizing acts of sabotage against the German military occupiers. She laid out drop zones for clandestine delivery of supplies, for weapons, for cash they needed, and communication equipment to the French resistance dropped by parachute from Allied planes. She quickly became a master of disguises and wigs and makeup, and an odd assortment of clothing that she had. She could change her appearance in seconds, it was said, speaking fluent German, French, or Italian as needed. She was especially skilled at exploiting German male chauvinism, which many times took her for granted. They took her for granted, in fact. They'd run into her, think they'd have somebody important, but no. Oftentimes they ignored her, allowing her to escape and operate freely. As the months turned into years, Virginia chalked up success after success. The Gestapo secret police began to hear rumors claiming that there was an American woman operating seemingly freely among them. The head of the Gestapo in Lyon, the infamous, brutal Klaus Barbie, railed over the woman known only to them by a poorly drawn composite sketch. That's all they had to that point. He called her that B word, swearing he would hunt down and get his hands on that girl soon. The Gestapo put a price on her head, leading a Europe-wide manhunt for the mysterious limping lady, as she was called. And despite the constant threat of capture, Virginia, with her uncanny abilities, continued her operations untouched, becoming the linchpin of a growing Allied intelligence network in Europe. The limping lady and her spreading reputation was a mark of fear for the enemy, for the Germans, but at the same time it was a symbol of hope for the oppressed and enslaved under Nazi tyranny. As the war progressed, Virginia's wide-ranging exploits for the British were observed by the American Office of Strategic Services, the OSS. This is the precursor to the American CIA. Wanting this woman, the American OSS transferred Virginia into its ranks. In late 1943, she continued her intelligence work under American leadership and expanding her sabotage operations and gathering vital intelligence to support the Allied planned invasion that was coming up of France on D-Day. Her second tour in France in 1944 was even more successful. Almost beyond belief, she was soon operating a network of 1,500 resistance fighters. Her success required razor-sharp timing and almost unbelievable skill at tradecraft. The Germans got better at tracking her radio signals, so she stepped up her own game, transmitting and then immediately packing up and moving, sometimes just minutes before the Gestapo arrived. To support the Allied invasion of Normandy, or D-Day, on June 6, 1944, Virginia armed and trained 3 full battalions of French resistance fighters for a host of sabotage missions to help clear the way for the Americans. From just a single radio broadcast, and she sent out many of these broadcasts, she reported, and was written and recorded in reports that were finally declassified. She had said in these broadcasts, "We destroyed 4 bridges, derailed freight trains, severed a key rail line, and downed telephone lines in the Normandy area," unquote. By the end of the war, she had spent an unheard of 3+ years operating undercover behind enemy lines while being hunted almost continually by an unforgiving enemy. I mean, the stress, it's just hard to imagine. And at the end, an official British government report at the end of the war, actually, in typical dry British understatement, described her operations as amazingly successful, unquote. The Gestapo throughout was enraged because they could not catch her. She was a ghost, literally, this crippled woman who always vanished when they thought they had her cornered, though they threw vast resources and manpower to nab her. That fact alone helped the war effort, in fact, forcing the Germans to use a huge number of police, Gestapo, and military resources just trying to hunt her down. And these resources then could not be used or not available to attack American and Allied military operations and personnel and men that were on the ground in Europe at that time. When the risk to her finally went sky high and she had several close calls, she didn't worry too much. She simply decided to become an entirely different person. Entirely different. Dedicated to perfection to her craft, she said, a rather fierce sort of scary dentist grind down and stain her lovely white American teeth so that she looked like an old French milkmaid, unquote. Operating in the Haute-Loire region of central France, now a bent, shaky hag, she continued to gather intelligence and work her radio, scheduling airdrops of arms, money, and supplies for the French resistance fighters, coordinating the blowing up of bridges and derailing troop trains, and spying on German troop movements. One reason she survived when others did not was due to her policy to never trust anyone, even agents thought to be clean. That seemingly fanatical caution saved her several times. She secured a job tending cows in a farm nearby a German military headquarters, right by their building, in fact, short distance, and would take milk and cheese to sell to the German soldiers in the town, bringing treats and hard-to-get meat to the talkative ones. Her agents in the region provided the old woman with intelligence about planned troop movements or Gestapo operations against the resistance. With new information, she'd then return to the farm, and she'd uncover her hidden radio buried in the barn under a pile of cow manure and transmitted the information to London. Following Allied occupation of France in the late summer of 1944, she was assigned to southern France near Italy to assist the successful invasion of Europe by the U.S. Fifth Army that was coming up from the Italian boot from Italy. As the war ended, successes from spies like Virginia Hall remained largely unknown. They were kept classified because of concerns over the new enemy, the Soviet Union, and wanting to know whether they would need those spy assets. With the surrender of Germany, Virginia's service to her country was not over. On September 27, 1945, she was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross at OSS headquarters in Washington, D.C., the only American woman and the first American civilian to be awarded this honor during World War II. After the war, Virginia Hall, safely back on American soil, continued her service, this time with the newly formed Central Intelligence Agency. Her proven experience in counterintelligence and clandestine operations inside enemy territory made her a valuable asset, but unfortunately, one that was apparently, simply out of jealousy, really ignored. In a secret CIA report of her career, which was recently made public, the agency admitted that her fellow officers felt that she had been sidelined or stunted to the backwater or unimportant accounts because she had so much experience that she overshadowed her male colleagues. Simply, they felt threatened by her, unquote. So, incredibly, she was given routine, worthless, paper-pushing jobs in Washington. Still, her dedication to preserving American freedom and democracy remained unwavering. Right to the end. She did what was required until forced to retire from the CIA in 1966 because of she was 60 years old and that was the mandatory age requirement. You know, sometimes we have heroes all around us and we never see them. In spite of her remarkable contributions, Virginia Hall's name and unprecedented story remain largely unknown. Truly one of America's greatest heroes. Still, she was continually denigrated by many of her male colleagues. One supervisor in Washington seemed to delight in giving her a poor grade on her annual proficiency evaluation. Obviously, many of the young college men hired after World War II during the 1950s bristled at a woman of Virginia's really superhuman stature and extraordinary field experience, which was so far beyond anyone in the CIA then and now, actually. Sadly, it wasn't until years after her death, as historical archives were declassified, that the world began to peel back the incredible story of this American super spy. Her accomplishments, purposely buried in the annals of the classified sometimes by jealous colleagues, emerged as a splendid testimony to the resilience and the success of that girl from Baltimore. During the war, World War II, Virginia met and fell in love with an OSS lieutenant, Paul Goyot. In 1957, the couple finally got married. They retired to a farm outside of Washington, D.C. She passed away on July 14, 1982, quietly leaving behind a legacy that continues to inspire, especially those with debilitating physical challenges. She is buried in the Druid Ridge Cemetery in Pikesville, Maryland. In 2019, during the Donald Trump administration, she was finally posthumously awarded the CIA's Distinguished Intelligence Cross, the agency's highest honor for field agents. The recognition, though coming way too late, at a minimum served as a final acknowledgement of the debt our nation owes this remarkable woman. Virginia Hall saw firsthand the satanic brutality of the Nazi regime and determined to do something about it. This unseen freedom fighter proved that heroes, when they are needed, step forward. Her story stands as a testimony to the often shrouded yet vital contributions of women in American history and American military history. The limping lady who knifed like a silent dagger through the murderous Nazi regime left to us all a unique legacy of quiet sacrifice and dedication. Though poorly treated and disrespected many times during her career, she never complained and never allowed herself to be the victim, gifting to us an enduring example of courage and tenacity. Thank you, Virginia Hall, for willingly sacrificing your own well-being to save our world in the grips of the worst kind of evil. We love you. We do. And I'm Grandpa Rick. Thank you.